Hello, my name is Cameron Doan, and I'm going to talk about theater history throughout the timeline of the eras. And the first one I'm going to talk about is Greek and Roman theater. Uh, Ancient Greece was about 800 BC to 200 BC, and most of their plays were tragedies, comedies, and satire. And satire was a uh, mythical type of play where there were centaurs that were actors, and there was a chorus in the ancient Greece uh, theaters where they were a group of actors that would influence the play. And ancient Rome was about 240 BC, and it was inspired by the Greek plays. It didn't have the chorus though, and some of the playwriters for ancient Rome was Plautus, Terence, and Seneca. Plautus and Terence were, I believe, comedy writers, and Seneca was a tragedy writer. And the big thing about ancient Rome theater was the upcoming of paratheatricals, where it was more like a sports venue. You'd have gladiators fighting, lions, and you'd have chariot races. It was more entertainment based and not as much art involved. Now, ancient Rome and medieval theater, they had a lot of influence by the Catholic Church. And in the medieval theater, the three classes of audience, upper class, middle class, and lower class, were all allowed to watch the plays. There's evidence that in ancient Greece that the only people allowed to attend were uh, citizens, which citizens at that time would be adult men only. And there's also evidence that women and children were also there, but um, and it's a lot clearer in the medieval time, that medieval era theater, that the women and children were allowed to uh, be the audience as well. Now, the Italian and English Renaissance uh, were a little different from medieval and ancient Rome and Greece. Italian Renaissance was about 15th century, and the main thing about Italian Renaissance is that there was a lot of philosophical and artistic views of theater. And then the English Renaissance was about the 16th century. It was after the Italian Renaissance. The Italian Renaissance was the first Renaissance for theater. And then English Renaissance, some of the major playwriters of that time were William Shakespeare, Christopher Marlowe, and Thomas Kidd. And there was some new vocabulary for the English Renaissance, coming from the English Renaissance for theater. Some of were blank verse, where the poems of the theater didn't have to rhyme. Dramaturg and professional theaters were had an uprising during the English Renaissance. William Shakespeare played had his theaters at the Globe, where it was more of a professional theater. And then after this, the French neoclassicism. It really showed that the French government had a major role in theater. King Louis XIII actually had made an academy for the French culture. And one of the major playwrights at this time was Pierre Corneille, and he made The Cid. French neoclassicism died off when Victor Hugo's play Hernani became popular. And then after Shakespeare and from the English Renaissance, there was the English Restoration drama. This was about 17th century, and this is, like I said, this was a period after Shakespeare. Uh, it had the Italianate staging. It had a lot of influence from Italy's staging, and there were breaches where there were women actors, and actually the first women actors were from French neoclassicism. They allowed women to be actresses. Where breaches in English Restoration, they the women actresses they would wear they would act as men. They would wear like men's clothing. And two of the main playwrights of this time, the English Restoration, was William Wycherley and William Congreve. And a major idea from English Restoration is the comedy of manners. It's where the playwright and the theater, the audience, like kind of like unwritten rules of how they should act during a play and how a play should be. And this takes me into melodrama, which is about 19th century, 1800s. This was inspired by the Industrial Revolution and the societal problems coming from the Industrial Revolution. There was a lot of poverty, and the playwriters would make their plays about poverty, and this was shown by that there would always be a villain, a hero, and a heroine, and the plays would always end happily, but there would always be episodic plots, which included suspense, comic relief, narrow escapes, reversals, and hidden documents. Two of the major playwriters of this time would be Gilbert de Pixérécourt and Dion Boucicault. These type of plays are not as popular in theater today, but they are popular in film and television shows, uh, movies. And then the last couple that I did were realism and expressionism, about the late 19th century. Realism is kind of inspired by melodrama, where the societal problems inspired what was being written in the plays. There, like I said, clear-cut heroes and villains, and melodrama the same in realism. And one of the major playwrights at this time would be Henrik Ibsen, with his play Oedipus Rex. Expressionism was mainly in Germany, and is about 1910 area, and the major thing about expressionism is the plays would be about the human body, the human spirit. They talked a lot about distortion, and one playwright from this time was Eugene O'Neill. So that's what I have about the eras of theater. I'd like to talk about like what influenced each time period a little bit more. The Greek and Roman time period, the Greek, they would have theaters rarely, and it was a religious festival. Every time they did have a theater, maybe twice a year, they would have theaters, and and when they did, it was, like I said, a religious festival. And then the Romans and the medieval, like I said before, they were more inspired by religion than the Greek, but the Greek did have religion inspiration, but just not as much as medieval and Roman. And then French neoclassicism, or the Italian and English Renaissance, were more artsy. They was inspired by art. And the French neoclassicism was also more of an art, and they were more rebellious as well. They had, like I said, they had women as actresses. This is not the norm for theater. And then English Restoration drama was inspired by an art as well, more of artsy as well. Also helped kind of make new norms for theater. And then melodrama and the rest of them are where the societal problems become to come to inspire a lot of the playwrights. And realism and expressionism as well. They were inspired by societal problems. And so that's what I have for the theater history, and thank you for watching.